Well, I have to tell you, everybody knew Nico way before he was the DA. But what we want to do is just kind of give a highlight of his academics and a little of his background. Most of you know he went to St. Mary's. He did his BA in finance at St. Mary's and also his JD. He served as a special prosecutor. He's 12 years. He did 12 years practicing law. He's an adjunct professor at St. Mary's. Wife for 9 years and 4 kids. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podium, Nico.
I'm not good about staying behind the podium. Can everybody hear me? Is that okay? I'm honored to talk with you. Thank you for having me here. And the topic that I think Ken asked me to talk about was what the DA's office does just in general. And then I want to save as much time as I can to, I move a lot, but I'll try.
It's okay.
But as much time as I can for Q&A, because I know that's what people are really, really interested in. And people like my friends like the Hills and Pastor Mitchell have heard me talk in the past, and Tony, but I'm going to just talk in general at first because a lot of people I haven't had the pleasure of talking in front of. What is the oath of a prosecutor in Texas? What do you think? Ms. Martin, what do you think the oath of a prosecutor is?
The oath of the prosecutor?
Yes, ma'am.
To be fair.
That falls within it. What do you think it is? Get the bad guys, seek convictions. What do you think it is? To be fair is for sure. It falls within that. Yes, sir, Pastor.
To properly interpret the law.
Proper interpret the law.
And then enforce it.
And enforce it. All that is right. But from a bigger perspective, it's to seek justice. What does that mean, right?
Yeah.
To seek justice. What I tell people is, did we get it right? Right? Are we doing the right thing with any situation? With the information that we have at the time. We don't always have information available to different stages of an investigation or prosecution, but did we get it right? I think it's very appropriate that you opened up with a prayer. I've been to your church, Pastor. Everyone knows I don't hide my faith. I'm a Christian. But it's really biblical, our oath, when you think about it. Micah 6:8, and we've talked about this, Mr. Hill. God said, what does the Lord ask of you? But you seek justice. It says it right there. Love kindness and walk humbly with your God. These are great qualities of, I think, of a prosecutor, of a judge, of anybody, really, but especially in our justice system when we deal with the situations that we deal with. Proverbs 17, God bless you. Proverbs 17:15 says this: to convict the innocent or to acquit the guilty, God detests them both. What does that mean? Did we get it right? I mean, so for me as a person of faith, this oath really goes with my grain of who I am in my spirit. But what does that mean? What everyone thinks of what justice is might be different, right? Does that make sense? And so when I took over this office, after it being under a certain mindset for 16 years, I knew that would be a challenging endeavor. I mean, you have a culture that was in there for 16 years. I'm not here to talk bad about my predecessor, but I knew that I needed to change a culture before I could implement any other changes from a program standpoint or mindset that if I wanted to be successful. So what I wanted to do is bring the idea of our justice system, the symbol of our justice system, back to Bexar County. Little quiz to make sure you're staying engaged. What is the symbol of our justice system?
Scales.
You said scales. The scales. Blindfold. All that's right. What is the statue called? Does anybody know? Who said that? Very good. Lady Justice. That's exact. And that goes back to the Greek and Roman times. Lady Justice is made as she represents and symbolizes the goddess Themis. Now, I don't worship Greek gods, you know, I'm a Christian, okay? But the goddess Themis was the goddess of order. That's right. Don't we want the justice system to bring order to our community, right? And everything that you mentioned, symbols, scales, blindfolds, have a direct meaning to what the symbol of justice should bring to a community. The blindfold, what does that represent? It's kind of obvious, but let's just talk about it. Justice should be blind. Doesn't look at race, color, creed. Republican, Democrat could care less about that, or shouldn't at least, and wants to do right. Get the facts and the law, merge them together to try to reach this very elusive concept called justice. Did we get it right? Why does she carry a sword? In the right hand, usually the Lady Justice, the representative, has a sword. Why? The justice system at times should be swift, right? Harsh. We deal with people that murder children, sexual assault of women, capital murder. I mean, the justice system should be swift and harsh at times, depending on the situation that we're dealing with. And we want that, right? That creates order. She puts her foot on a book. Why? Why is her left foot on a book? Why do you think that? The law, right? I mean, you have to know the law to enforce the law. So wisdom. Proverbs 3:8 talks about wisdom is more precious than rubies and gold and silver, right? Wisdom. And so we should have wisdom of the law and also just practical wisdom in application of that law. And in between her foot and the book, she is stepping on a serpent. Regardless of your faith, and I'm not pushing mine on you, but regardless of your faith, what is the universal symbol of a serpent?
Evil.
Evil.
Devil.
The devil, evil, right? The justice system should stomp out evil in every society, right? But when it's all said and done, in her left hand she holds what? The scales. She's got to balance it all out, right? And deal with competing interests, and you've got so many different interests in a community, and she should be blind to all that and focus on doing what's appropriate. And I say that appropriate and right, depending on the circumstances with the information provided to her at the time. So some of the things that I've done, and I'm going to just wind up a little bit so I can get the Q&A started. We changed the culture, and I knew I had to lead by example. I mean, there were people that when I took over the office, and there's people in the office that I kept that I knew were not for me, but I knew they were good for the community. I made a promise to God and to you, the community, that I would do what's best for the community, not for me. So you humble yourself, you let your flesh go, and you do what's right, and you give people opportunities to sink or swim. And I did that. And I think that when you lead by example and you be consistent about that leadership, I think you're going to reap a good harvest once you continue to sow those good seeds. And so we started. I tried 2 cases last year myself. I wanted to lead by example, and I was actually in the courtroom for weeks at a time, trying cases, very serious cases. We started a training program for our prosecutors. We want them to be prepared for our battlefield is the courtroom. And if they're not prepared for the evidentiary battles, the expert battles, and stylistically how to present a case, we're going to lose, even if we should win, right? And we started the conviction integrity unit. That was a big unit that we started. I got a lot of slack from that from some people. Maybe not from everybody. I said, what is a prosecutor starting a conviction integrity unit for? There he is. What did they call me? I was called so many names I forget after a while. Fox in the hen house, right? There's that defense attorney trying to let all the bad guys go. That's what they said about me. But remember, go back to our oath. What's our oath? To seek justice. Why wouldn't the district attorney's office, why wouldn't the prosecutorial branch of the justice system be part of fixing a problem if you know that the system got it wrong? Why wouldn't we do that? At the time that we started this unit, it was in February of last year, there was only 9 conviction integrity units in the whole country. Out of all the prosecutorial agencies, DAs, county attorneys, there was only 9 CIU units. That was shameful in my opinion. Now there's close to 30. I was asked to speak in Brooklyn to talk about how we set up ours and the checks and balances and why it's there. But when you go back to our oath, it's to seek justice. Did we get it right? We know the horrific situation of Michael Morton, right? I mean, Bruce, I know you know about that. You've written about that, I'm sure. But Michael Morton's an individual, and this is an extreme situation, right? But there's other situations there where he spent 25 years in prison for murdering his wife. Do you have a problem with that, Mr. Hill? Someone spending 25 years in prison for murdering their wife?
Was it justified though?
That's a great, serious question. I know Mr. Hill. The problem is, I didn't plan that, by the way. The problem is, he didn't kill his wife. That should bother everybody. That should, and 2 things. Here's the double whammy. You have a young boy. They grew up for 25 years. This is the humanistic. This is where I take off my DA hat. And this is just Nico, LaHood, the spiritual man. Yes, this little boy was raped and grew up for 25 years thinking his daddy murdered his mom. How do you change that? Now, I'm going to speak with him. I'm going to meet Mr. Morton here in about a month, I think, right? Or maybe 2 months. We're going to speak on a panel together. I hear he's a tremendously faithful man. He's worked on reconciling that relationship in truth now instead of deception. And you don't give him that time back. Here's the second whammy. The man that was responsible for murdering his wife murdered again. There's no legal way to say that just sucks. I'm sorry, I'm not going to say it in a way. That's horrible. That should bother everybody. So when you have extreme situations like that, why wouldn't any prosecutorial branch want to have a conviction integrity unit? They should, to function separate than the appellate section. That makes sense, right? You're not going to have the appellate section of the DA's office saying, hey, this is a good conviction, theoretically. And then you're going to want them to function separately, and that's how we've set up this unit in our office locally. So that's a good thing. We started a child abuse unit. It wasn't just campaign BS. I truly believe children are a gift from God. I've been blessed with 4 children, and one of them is special needs. And God doesn't make any mistakes. And I'm thankful for all my children. And I've learned more with my children, to include Michael, who's on the spectrum of autism. I've learned more from my children in 43 years that I've been on this earth than their short lives that they've been on this earth. I'm going to continue to grow and learn and do wisdom and maturity by raising those children that God has entrusted in me. But our children, and what I've told this to the community, and I challenge everyone from Judge Sakai to our civil judges, to Judge Wolf, to everybody. Our children don't choose us as their parents. Let that sink in. They're stuck with us. It's up to us to make it a good stuck, not a bad stuck, right? Well, I see children that are stuck with some bad parents. And then before, they were stuck with a bad circumstance. So if the parents were horrible, then the system was horrible. What are you going to produce? Horrible, right? Right? As a man thinks, so he is. What I challenge young people when I go to schools, and I speak at a lot of schools, is you will never live beyond what you believe. So what do you believe? About your past, your circumstances, your future, your poor choices in your life, mistakes, and all that good stuff, right? And that applied to me as well. People all know my testimony of how I got here, and I'll talk about that later at some point. But so that was that. So child abuse unit, we have 22 prosecutors in that unit. That was up from 14. There was only 47 cases in 2014 before we took over, trials on child abuse or neglect cases. Only 47 with only a 53% conviction rate. Last year alone, 1 year, this unit has done amazing. I don't take any credit for it other than starting the unit and encouraging them and training, making sure they're trained. Last year alone, they tried 70 cases instead of 47 with an 80% conviction rate. Close to that, close to it. That's a big difference. Now, I don't just want convictions, as I said earlier, just to have convictions, right? We believe that's the right thing to do. We're not afraid to dismiss cases. See, that's not a shot on you, Bruce, but the media is not my friend, and they're not anybody's friend, right? But what they don't talk about is the stuff that's not sexy. They don't talk about the sexy stuff. When cases are dismissed, when someone's not prosecuted, when the right things happen in the office, it doesn't get all the limelight, and I don't go seeking it out. We're going to do what we do all the time in that office. The culture in that office is to do what's right, not what's easy. If you go to my office, Mr. Hill's been there. I don't know if you've been in my office, Mr. Hill, but when you walk out there's a sign that says, do what's right, not what's easy. Because what's easy is what? It's easy. Everybody can do it. But when you do what's right, or appropriate, depending on your perspective and the situation, that's the hard part. That's where the rubber meets the road. And we've done many, many other things. I'm working with Judge Sakai and Judge Wolf on the redesign of the children's court. What we're seeing with our CPS lawyers, because we represent CPS, we're actually the representative, we're seeing that we can see a lot of these problems before it rises to the level of a violation of the penal code. And where someone's on the criminal side of the justice system, we can be proactive and work on the civil side to help parents become better parents. Compadre, compadre, celebrating families, things of that nature. Great programs out there, 501c3s that are really fighting this battle in the trenches for us and for you, and we just need to support them. And so I'm a huge advocate of being proactive. Our justice system, by default, is set to be reactive. We need to be more proactive and try to stop some of this. And so we're doing that. And I'm challenging people. Everybody knows I'm not politically correct. I'm just going to speak my mind. I'm going to speak the truth in love, right? Let the chips fall where they may. But we just need to have these conversations so we can better this community. And that's what we want to do. So there's a lot of other things we've done, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview because I know that there's probably a lot of questions, and I want to make sure that I make myself available with the time that I have left to answer.
Floyd's going to grab the floor for questions.
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
On the Q&A, guys, let's keep what we normally do for our meetings in perspective. We want to ask some direct questions and we want to get some answers. We want to be professional about that as well. At the same time, let's remember that we do have a DA that's here. There may be some things he can't talk about in detail because there's research going on and those cases are still pending. So, he will answer what he can.
Smith right here was first.
He will answer what he can and he'll give you an answer on that. But main thing, let's respect the fact that he's taking the time to be here and let's keep it professional. Thank you.
Well, Nico and I spoke earlier about training of police officers and what the DA, how the DA is involved in that. The concern, I think, the public is that what can be done if, in that all the accusations have been found not supported by the courts or by individuals or by the public, and yet folks are getting killed, young African American kids are getting killed for having cell phones in their hands. If it is training involved, should there be psychological training earlier to find out all these people, do they have a propensity to overreact?
Sure.
All kinds of things.
That's a loaded question. I want to make sure, I can really talk about a lot of different subjects, and some might be some of the questions Mr. Hill already has or not, I'm not sure. So what a lot of people don't realize is the DA's office is the hub. right? I've had a lot of questions about the grand jury process, and if you want me to talk about that, I will too, and about law enforcement, that law enforcement, we're in cahoots or not in cahoots with law enforcement. Look, the chief knows this, and the sheriff knows this. I could care less about indicting a law enforcement officer. I'm not for or against that. If that's the right thing to do, we're gonna do it. Does that make sense to everybody? We have about, Chief, what is it? I mean, I think close to 60 cases open. Chief Ning is here, our investigators. I think we have about 60 cases open right now on law enforcement officers. Again, no one talks about that, but that's a fact. That's just the reality. Is it 60? Roughly about 60? And that's when we have 40 agencies that surround Bexar County that we deal with. And so cases are brought to us. They're worked up by some law enforcement agency. We don't do the initial investigation. We are not an initiating agency is what we call it. An initiating agency is a law enforcement agency that shows up to a scene, answers a complaint, does the initial investigation, and then they hand it over to either a federal prosecutor or a state prosecutor. We're the state prosecutor, okay? We take that investigation, and the reason why we have close to 50 investigators is to support the prosecutors in the court, in the trial division, that if there's evidence missing, we don't do another investigation. We further the investigation and shore up and analyze the evidence that's turned into us. So the question, and to answer Mr. Smith's question, I think training does help. What we are starting, and you're going to be the first to hear it, it's going to continue to materialize, okay? Because I want to do things right. I don't like to go back and press rewind or delete button. I like to go slow, respond versus react, and act appropriately. We're going to start a law enforcement integrity unit. It's really going to be a use of force, but it could be for official oppression, where we're going to have a unit that's actually going to investigate in our office these type of allegations. Now, I'm not looking to get law enforcement officers. You shouldn't be doing that either, right? We just want everybody to use authority that's been provided to them, to include prosecutors and judges, right? Appropriately. Just do what's right. Sometimes a tough decision is a tough decision, but do what's right. And understand what the scenarios that people are in. But if somebody goes past that authority and misuses that authority, they should be held accountable. Everybody's okay with that. I'm okay with that. I know you guys are okay with that. And so that's what we do, and that's why we have those cases open on law enforcement officers now. But we're going to have a unit that's going to go out for training, to get specialized training, right? And investigative, and all those cases will be handled by this one unit. That unit will be in our old white collar unit. Okay, it's going to fall under Jim Wheat, who is our division chief, and that unit is in the process of being formulated and formalized right now officially. So, but training does help. I don't know I can't speak for what Chief McManus and Sheriff Parmalee are doing with training, but it absolutely does help. But I think something that I know that Mr. Hill and I have spoken about in the past is relationship building. I think that, and I can't, again, the chief, only I can do my part, is we should all get together and let the community know that it's not you versus us, or anybody versus anybody, right? Because everybody's for order in their society. Everybody is. I mean, I know, Mr. Smith, that not that you're older, but you're mature. I mean, there was a time, right?
That is a word.
Right? I mean, I grew up on the south side with my grandma near St. Leo's. There was a time where you left your front door open. You just had the screen with the little hook. Anybody could have kicked that open, right? It was just for a dog so they didn't walk inside. But you can't do that anymore. Nobody would do that. I mean, you let your kid, when I was growing up, and be back by 5, who would let your kids be back by 5 now? I mean, that's not the standard anymore. Maybe it shouldn't be, and maybe it should, depending on where you're at. So things have changed, and there's a new normal in our society overall. And I think we need to respond appropriately to that. And training, communication, relationship building, I think is key. And then just talking and being transparent about stuff. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Hill? I'm sorry, he had his hand. Do you mind, sir? And I'll come back to you.
Since the rise of fatal shootings by police officers, there are a couple of areas, or I guess you could say, one state in particular, California, and I think there's another place, that they're going to do away with grand juries for when a police officer is shot or kills a person, let me put it this way. Are you amenable to this also in the DA's office? Just indict and go to court, rather than going through a grand jury process? Because let me finish.
Sure.
Because you've said all yourself that you can indict a ham sandwich. All right.
Well, I haven't said that. Someone else has said that.
Well, you said that not too long ago.
I'll answer
Okay.
that.
All right. All right. I was there when you said it.
I'll
Okay.
clarify with you.
Okay. Okay. But the point is, if that's the case, and it's written in a lot of places that the DA's office can indict a ham sandwich. All right. So the point that I'm trying to make now, why not just go straight to court with when there's a fatal shooting by a police officer rather than going through a grand jury, because it seems that when you go through a grand jury, the police officers, and it's historical facts that they're 99% of the time they're never indicted. So how do we overcome that? Because the community is still looking.
Okay, you said a lot, Mr. Hill, as usual, so I'm gonna have to respond to each one. I'll try to compartmentalize that. What someone is saying, I guess in California, is to do away with the grand jury process for just law enforcement only,
Just
right?
law enforcement.
I mean, I think you need to be careful of the world you help create, right? You might have to live in it. The Constitution protects grand jury process, the Constitution, so we'd have to do a constitutional amendment. I'll follow the law, whatever the legislature gives us, but you have to think about why are we doing what we're doing, whatever the action is. Why are you doing it? What is your goal in doing that? So I believe in our grand jury process. What I was talking about earlier about you can indict a ham sandwich. Remember, I was a passionate defense attorney for 12 years. You and I have spoken about that. There's not anyone in this community that knew me when I was a defense attorney, and there's not a prosecutor that dealt with me when I was a defense attorney that would not agree that, well, Nico's a passionate defense attorney, okay? I fought the fights that nobody else wanted to fight. The judges can attest to that, okay? Here's the deal. The old system, again, not making fun light of anybody, and I've had, T.C. Calvert was in our meeting and he verified this from the previous administration. The reason why they say you can indict a ham sandwich is because the DA decides the evidence is presented to a grand jury.
Right.
We decide that. I'm telling you right now, that's an honest truth. I can pick and choose and cherry pick what I present to a grand jury. That is disingenuous, and that is not right in my opinion. I'm constructively critical to my colleagues. Other DAs still do that, I'm assuming. You can't talk about what you present, but I mean, how do you get a case where you indict somebody and then they're acquitted later on? Or you indict somebody and then it's a hung jury later on, right? I mean, you can pick and choose. There's no doubt in my mind. Not that you'd ever be before a grand jury, Mr. Hill, but I could indict you if I wanted to. That doesn't mean it's right. Definitely doesn't mean it's moral. It doesn't mean it's legal. So the new system here, in general, that I can talk about, we present everything to a grand jury. Everything. Whatever evidence is presented to us at the time, we present it. Now, let me tell you what I got criticized from the police union, which I'm not a fan of the police union. Mike Haley, he knows him, and I've not got along in the past. It's okay. I'll say it to his face. I'm not afraid to say it to anybody. Let me tell you why I got criticized for it. Because they asked me to present shoot-no-shoot scenarios to grand juries. Bring in experts to talk about shoot-no-shoot scenarios. I go, why would I do that, guys? That's more appropriate for a petit jury later on if it gets past the indictment process. Why am I taking an adversary position in a grand jury when I'm supposed to just present evidence and let a grand jury make a decision if there's enough evidence to move forward to another level? I said no to that. We're not doing that. We don't pick some people and live witnesses and others not live witnesses. That's another big question. We don't present live witnesses as a general rule. Now, a grand jury can subpoena anybody. They can request any piece of evidence they want to. Now, am I considering doing live testimony for officer-involved shootings? I am considering that. I will tell you that. I haven't told you that before, Mr. Hill. I am. But if I do live testimony, then you do it for everybody. You don't pick and choose. I can't say, well, let me get live testimony for the deceased, but not for the law enforcement officer. And then you have to do live testimony. See, what people lose focus on, I believe one of my duties in my job as a DA is to preserve a process. Preserve a process. Like I said this earlier, be careful of the world you help create, because someday you might have to live in it. So whatever world we all create, what if it applies to us? Because everybody wants justice until it's pointed at them, then they want mercy, right? That's just human nature, right? So we have to be careful of the world we help create. Can it withstand muster, whether it applies to our family, your family, anybody's family? Is there truly blindfold on Lady Justice? And I understand that you feel like there hasn't been in the past. And on certain scenarios, I agree with you. I was leading the charge against, quote unquote, the system, against the DA's office many times, and certain law enforcement officers, because not all of them are bad, and I think everybody agrees with that. Not every law enforcement officer is bad. There are good and bad in every scenario. There are some prosecutors that should not have a bar card. There are some judges, not that we're here, we're blessed, that should not have a robe. and there's some law enforcement officers that need to be arrested themselves. Hypocrisy. Let me tell you what's hypocrisy. And what used to drive me insane when I was a defense attorney. Insane. I used to tell either a law enforcement officer or the system, you want to hold my client accountable for breaking the rules, but you're okay with breaking the rules to hold my client responsible for breaking the rules. Now, how does that make sense? That's hypocrisy. Do as I say, not as I do, hypocrisy. What Jesus said is do as I did, right? He's the ultimate leader. So whether you believe in him or not, he's a great leader. But so, I mean, this is the difference in culture what we're doing in this office. I can't fix everything overnight. But one thing I think, Mr. Hill, you can agree is I've never said no to you, right? And we've always met. We've always had an open dialogue. We've agreed to disagree a couple of times, maybe more than a couple of times. But that's okay. But I know his heart. I know he has good intentions, and I hope he knows my heart and I have good intentions. So, hope that answered your question. If you don't, may I take his question, sir?
Certainly. Yeah.
My question was, you mentioned about a unit that you've started that deals with persecution, then I guess relooking at past convictions. What's your percentage rate of those that you determined was inappropriately?
We've looked at roughly, as of a month and a half ago, about 250 cases we looked at. We've actually been an integral part in helping release 2 people, and we're looking at 2 others. And that might not seem like a lot, but it's still 2 people, right? I mean, you talk to those people, it's a lot of people, right? No, I'm just saying, I agree with you. Because guess what? If it's your life, you're like, well, yeah, it makes everything. So, I mean, and it matters. It matters, but it matters not only to them, but to their children and their children's children. It's a generational deal. That's why we have to get it right. See, this is something that no one feels comfortable. I mean, when you're talking amongst people of faith, it's a different conversation than the secular world. And if you're not of faith, that's okay. But this is deeper. It's a generational curse or not if you can break that cycle. We see it all the time in the justice system. These baggage, the secular system, they're strongholds. That, I tell this to when I'm talking to daddies at compadre, I've spoken many times there. Your children will follow your example long before they follow your advice. Right? Well, how does daddy treat mommy? Well, that's how I'm going to treat a woman. Right. Well, how does that man treat mommy? Well, that's how I guess I should be treated by a man. Or whatever it is, or manners, or how you look at the world. Your worldview is shaped by your influential people in your life, which are your parents, hopefully. And if you don't have parents, then the streets develop it, or whoever else, or Hollywood, and they're all jacked up, or whatever develops it, right? And so we need to get deeper. We need to get behind it. We need to open the hood and get deeper on this issue, because our justice system deals with symptoms. Listen to me. Deals with symptoms. We're real good at dealing with symptoms. Everybody wants a pill to fix everything. You go to a doctor, they give you a pill. Everybody wants fast food, fast money, fast women, fast cars, fast taxes, everything's fast. Nobody has patience anymore. Take a selfie and you can send it around the world in 1 second. No one has patience anymore. And everything we deal with in the justice system is a symptom. Anger is a symptom. I assure you, I was an angry SOB for many years after my brother was murdered. Okay? Violence is a symptom. Promiscuity is a symptom. Substance abuse is a symptom. It's all a symptom, right? And we don't get deep enough, and we treat the symptom instead of getting to the cause and really trying to create true change in people's lives. If you want to change people's behavior, change what they believe about themselves and the world, and then you'll change behavior. That's my opinion. My sermon's done, Pastor. Yes, sir.
Yes. I've asked this question before.
Yes, sir.
And I still think we need to address it. And that is, we have a screening process on the grand jury. Because you get people in there on the grand jury, and they have all their stuff, whatever it is. And so they may not really do the right thing. I mean, we can't control that. But at least in the other system, you get challenges in terms of who's on your jury.
Okay. You haven't asked it that way yet. What he's asking about, when you're picking a jury in a court of law, because it's an adversarial position, you have challenges. You have peremptory challenges, meaning for any reason, basically, other than race and gender. And then you have challenges for cause, right? You have challenges for cause. So both adversaries have challenges to a jury pool to try to get a fair and balanced jury pool, a jury that will listen to the facts of the case that are supposed to be theoretically unbiased.
So Judge, are we talking about grand jury?
Grand jury.
He's making the distinction. He's making a distinction.
I didn't hear that.
In a grand jury, there's not that process because it's not an adversarial position.
Okay.
The citizen accused is not there to present their evidence. A defense attorney is not there to present their evidence. Do you see what I was talking about earlier, why you can indict a ham sandwich? I never said that. That's a saying that goes around. And the reason why they say that is because the DA can control with impunity what evidence is presented to a grand jury. Now you tell me, if I can pick and choose only the stuff I want you to see, but I don't want the stuff that shows exoneration, I don't want you to see it. And you'll indict them on a probable cause level. That doesn't mean they'll be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt once the jury sees the whole picture or whatever, argument, litigation, trial techniques, all that stuff. So that's what I'm talking about. So in a grand jury, what he's talking about, there's not an adversarial role, so you don't have strikes on grand juries. It's done by your license. It's not done, as we've talked about before, we don't do pick-a-pal. We haven't done pick-a-pal in Bexar County for years, by the way, but the law has changed because smaller counties were being influenced by that. What pick-a-pal is, I'm the presiding judge. Hey, Tony, get 5 of your friends, and then you get a couple of your friends, and then now you're on the, well, then you got a whole genre of folks and like-minded people that are on a grand jury, and I think that's when you run into the risk and the trouble that you're talking about. Now it's just from your driver's license. What we can do as a community is encourage our friends and family to show up. If I told you the percentage of people, judges, to show up for grand jury and or petty juries, you would say how shameful. And then maybe you've been one of those folks. I won't call you out. Just keep it between you and God. Okay? But when you're asked to show up, encourage people to show up. We can't make people show up. I'm not trying to get you out of grand jury pride. We're not going to go get you and track you down. We just can't. There's too many people.
So what's the duration? Everybody can hear that. Tell the duration of grand jury.
2 months process. It's a 2-month process. We have 2 grand juries going on all the time. We have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays. 2 grand juries going on for 2 months. And then another grand jury comes in, and then they're sworn in. And by the way, here's something that people don't realize, and the judges can attest to this. The grand jury is not the DA's grand jury. We don't impanel them. We don't discharge them, right, Judge? The judges do it, the district court judge. We just assist them in the evidence that they want in presentation of evidence. That's it. And they're not our grand jury. We don't even have authority on them to pick an alternate, right? I mean, we don't do that sua sponte, meaning on our own. We have to go to a district court judge to handle that type of scenario. But that's a misconception about a grand jury also, many of them. Yes, ma'am.
So following up on what you're saying, do you have any demographics on who is showing up for the 2-month process for a grand jury?
I don't, and I've never looked at that, and it's something that I would look at, but how do I control that regardless? I mean, it's something to look at.
But it's that conversation about
Sure.
who does show up, because it's who's available to
Sure.
show up or willing to show up for a 2-month process in this community.
It's registered voters, right, through your license, you know, so, and then you have to show up, which I agree. That's something I absolutely look at.
It's kids, it's
Sure.
a job, it's
Sure.
a lot of
Oh, I
things.
get it. We get it all the
Employment and
time.
non- Which is why they're not.
I get it.
But it's not an everyday thing, though, is it?
It's 2 days a week.
I
Yes,
think
sir.
that people need to understand
Sure.
that. It's not every day, it's 2 days a week.
Yes, sir.
I was on the grand jury 3 times, 100 years ago, though. But you see, so it's not every day, and a lot of people may not understand that. They may think it's every day until something is resolved.
You're right.
So how do
I
we
agree
get
with
that?
you.
How do we get that information?
I tell you, and I am available for public service announcements. I'll do whatever. I'll go talk to communities. I make myself available to talk about whatever issue I can talk about legally and ethically. I'll do it.
Well, that one, we have one over here.
Yes, do you mind, ma'am? I'm sorry, we have a question.
I'm gonna digress a little bit. What is the most difficult decision you've had to make since you've been in office?
Ooh, what's the most difficult? Well, it's always, they're all difficult decisions.
I mean, what would you say?
I'll tell you
was
this,
the most difficult?
regardless of what people think, when it comes to like the Marquise Jones situation, I make decisions to present to the grand jury. Not every officer involved shooting gets presented to a grand jury. I don't use the grand jury as cover. So that was to me an easy decision to present it, and the grand jury does what they want. The most difficult decision was right when I took office. I was 1 month into office. Chief Pimentel, Bruce knows about this, had been murdered. I mean, he had been murdered. He was a chief of a small town around us, small little community around us. And everybody wanted us to seek the death penalty. And I evaluated the case with wisdom is found in the counsel of many, right? Proverbs 18. I mean, we had our counsel. I have a system that we have established, division chiefs. There's a system and process on capital cases. I ultimately make the decision. I don't push that off on anybody. I'm the leader. I stand by my decisions after counsel and wisdom, and then I think about it. And so we looked at it from those 2 special issues of future danger and is there anything salvageable basically about this individual. I'll keep it real simple. And I looked at that. He was a young man that had some mental health issues. No one knew about that at the time. I made the decision not to seek death. I got so much back. I mean, 1 month on the job, right? I mean, law enforcement criticized me. People criticize. What message are you sending to the community? Folks, there's things you don't know, man. I can't talk about it. I had to stand on the truth, know that I made the right decision. The young man went off for psychological evaluation, and we're waiting, and hopefully he'll get competency again, and he'll be held accountable for his actions. But that was the most difficult, especially being a young DA, taking over after 16 years of a mindset, knowing that people are watching and hoping, some people hoping, waiting for me to fall. And I just had to make the right decision with counsel, and we did. And I don't think anybody questions it now. I went out, I spoke at police academies, I walked in there and everybody gave me the crooked eye, like, oh, here's this SOB, whatever. And I spoke truth to them. I went on radio shows, I spoke to the media, I stood by my decision and I spoke about what I could speak about, and I couldn't speak about other stuff. And I hope and I pray and I think that people have seen consistency in this office in 16 years. So,
Ms. Brown?
I just had a question going back to the jury selection. How is it that, and I guess I don't understand exactly how they do it, if it's a lottery or a pool of driver's licenses, how some people, you see some people that get it more often than others, and then I know people who are registered to vote and have driver's license, and they've never gotten selected.
I mean, maybe the judge can, it's just kind of, it's random. I mean, you serve once every 2 or 3 years. 3 years. So once you serve one time, you have your excuse. You can actually say, look, I served within 3 years. It's once every 3 years and it's random. I think we have a little over 900,000 registered voters. So think about that. I believe, and I could be wrong. I'll verify that if you want to, but it's a random process. We don't control that. We just, I think Ms. Hill had a question, Pastor. Sorry.
I just want to say thank you for your desire to want to serve. It's not easy to be in a job where you get a lot more criticism than you do. Thank you. Real quickly, we asked my granddaughter when she was about 6 years old what she learned in school, and she said active listening. So I have been trying to actively listen to all that has been said. And I still have a question, although it would have to be a process that would have to go through the state legislature to change. But I don't hear any positives about cases going direct to trial rather than to a grand jury. It seems to me, just from what I hear and understand, that it would be fairer to both individuals in that the person who's accused of the a crime or whatever, that they would both be able to have someone represent them and the information, rather than it be filtered through a grand jury and, you know, not all the information be presented. Could you just speak to why you think it would not be a better system for it to go direct to trial?
Sure. There's a lot of cases, non-law enforcement cases, that get no bill from a grand jury, and I'll talk about that in a second. You need 9 out of 12 to have a quorum, and you need 9 out of 12 to true bill a case. But what if someone is in indecency with a child by contact or exposure? And there's cases that get no billed in a grand jury. There's not an official term, no bill, that's a term of art that we use, but do not get indicted. Think about that. Think of automatically, and then you talk about tarnishing the name. The Constitution was set up in a way that says any serious crimes, to include capital crimes, have to go before a grand jury and make sure that there's a minimal level of evidence before it gets presented to a pettit jury, where the Constitution obviously applies in due process, right of effective assistance of counsel, right to cross-examine, right to a jury of your peers, things of that nature. So I'm not opposed to it. I mean, I think we need to be cautious, because think about that world that we would create. But then you have a situation where, because not every case, we don't have to present every case to a grand jury. We don't have to. There's cases we don't even present to a grand jury, like I told you. We don't have to. The real decision ultimately in the DA's office initially is, do you present this case to a grand jury? When a case comes in, if we feel an officer, and they're called the NITMAG number, it's a pre-indictment case. If we feel that there's and we get a bunch of them, right, Chief? I mean, where it's like, not a bunch, but enough, where it's like, we're not even going to present this. We're rejecting this case. It's not even a dismissal officially yet. We're rejecting this case before we even go to a grand jury. So there's this kind of like this checks and balances theoretically set up. I understand it's been abused in the past. I can't change that, right? I can only control what we're doing now, and hopefully what we're doing in the future. I'm open-minded to any discussions. And like I've said to in our previous meetings, whatever the legislator tells us to do in the form of the rule book, my job is to protect and to enforce the laws of the state of Texas and of the United States. I'll do it. But right now, this is our system we have, so I'm just trying to make the process. Although we don't always like the outcome, the process has to be consistent. That's the bottom line. If you look at all the cases, all of the shootings, in all cases, every one of them, I assure you, has been handled the same way. Every one of them. And I think that's what you want, because when I start cherry picking and deciding, well, politically, this would be better for me, gosh, I I need to indict somebody. Okay, this is it. Sorry, bad roll of the dice. You're getting indicted, brother. That doesn't. I don't think that's right, because then I get the God complex, and then I'm controlling everything instead of the system set up by the people to control, which is the way the Constitution was set up. That's my humble opinion, but I'll do whatever the legislator tells me.
Basically, we need to advocate for the law. So basically what you're saying is that we as citizens, in order to basically to protect ourselves in some cases, we need to advocate for the law to be changed.
If you believe the law is not fair, then that's right. You go to your representative or your senator, and then they would advocate and try to get other support from other representatives and senators. And it goes through the process during the legislation, and then they would change eventually.
Well, the NAACP is, we're on the right track there.
Okay. But that, yes, ma'am, that would be the process if that's what you wanted to do.
I think we had one more back there somewhere, didn't we?
Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Okay. I need your blessings, Pastor Al. I'm sorry.
I want to continue with the discussion of the grand jury.
Yes, sir.
And several of the meetings that I've had with you along with others, we've talked about the grand jury, the role that it plays, and how, as a prosecutor or as the district attorney, you have limitations. Even though, yes, you could indict a ham sandwich, you still have to follow certain procedures in order to even get a grand jury put together. My question is, given the fact that, let's take an example, and I won't call any names, if you had a case where an individual had a weapon and killed another individual who did not have a weapon, you almost get a sense that something would be done, some kind of case would happen. But if that individual that doesn't have a weapon were to have been an officer and the civilian had a weapon, I think the justice would go very swiftly for that, against that civilian, to say, let's prove what was done. When you flip the script and you have a civilian that doesn't have a weapon and the officer has committed whatever, then we got to have a grand jury and so forth. It seems to me that in order to get justice, because when the grand jury meets and they make their decision, the public gets their decision, but they don't get all the information. They don't know what went into them making their decision.
That's correct.
So the public is left holding the bag going, this is not right. This is not right.
And perception is reality, right?
Yeah. Perception is reality. So my question is, what do you, and I've heard you say this before, you have to stay by the laws, go by the laws, but the way the law is set up, the grand jury, in my opinion, can go whichever way somebody wants it to go. And that's a hindrance, because in the case where you have, say, a civilian that is shot, and particularly when you have conflicting views on what happened, if it goes to a grand jury and they decide, then the public never gets to hear what the issues, not the issues were, but the evidences were. And that's why people are so angry.
Sure, I get it. No, I understand.
How do you change the system of the grand jury? I heard NAACP chief say that in California they have a system. Maybe that is the answer, maybe not, but there ought to be something that in a case where you've got the whole public in an uproar, that somebody can hear the evidence. And that's what I thought the jury system was for, so that it gets there. So the perception is that, and I don't think it's fair to you or whoever sits in your seat, that somebody is cherry picking, even if you're not. So why not avoid that by letting that go to the people? Particularly when you have such conflict. I know of a particular case, and you know of it too, where the officer said one thing and several witnesses said another, and still there was no indictment. And it seems like, how could someone come to a conclusion if you've got two conflicting opinions and someone says, well, but we're gonna take that one.
You said a lot,
yeah.
Pastor, and you talked about use of deadly force, and that's a whole different discussion on what the standard
Yes,
is for
yes.
use of deadly force, the reasonable belief of apparent danger, and was it imminent? We've talked about that in the past. I don't know, I want to try to address everything, so I won't expound on that right now. That's not a different standard for law enforcement. If you defend yourself at home, it's the same standard. The reasonable belief of apparent, not actual, apparent danger, and was it imminent? I mean, if you're walking home and someone says, I didn't like your sermon, and they're, you know, across the, well, no, across the block, and they have a bat.
Yes.
They have a bat. I mean, can you shoot that guy? You can't. Was it reasonable? Maybe. Is it apparent? Well, it's actual. It's not even apparent because you see the bat. I mean, it could be apparent and not actual, but you're still okay. It's actual, but is it imminent? I'm across the block, and unless I'm a bat thrower, and you know I am, you can't shoot me. But at some point you can shoot me, and there's no clear delineation.
Right,
that same standard applies to law enforcement officers in their situation. So uniform plays into it, but a lot of things play into this thing. And I'm just talking in generality now. Now, what I would not support a system that treats any sector of our society different than any other one. I would not. Because then where does it end? Remember, be careful of the world you help create. And so I'm just saying, if you want to get rid of the grand jury process, and if that's what our legislator did, that would be fine. The problem is you guys don't realize how many cases are no bills, and how many times justice is received when a law enforcement officer maybe makes a knee-jerk reaction, makes an arrest, but it doesn't go any further. Someone doesn't hire an attorney, doesn't get shamed, doesn't make it to a court of law, doesn't hope that this jury of 12 makes the right decision. I mean, so it's really supposed to be set up theoretically, I'm going to say theoretically, as a buffer, right? I know it hasn't always been used by that. It's been used as a weapon a lot of times, right? And cover. I get all that. That's not my heart. And all I can do is keep expressing my heart and let you know the system and the process that it's consistent in this office. So these are deeper discussions, and I'll have them with you. You know that, Pastor. I will. I know that we've probably run out of time.
No, we're good.
Sorry.
Final question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Final question.
Just a quick question. How has the open carry made it more difficult for our police officers?
You know, everyone was afraid of the open carry. I'm a pro-gun guy. Everybody knows that. I believe in responsible gun ownership. Okay? It hasn't. It's been a non-issue. There's been no, I mean, at first law enforcement, I was against it. And I'm a pro-gun guy and I was against it. I'll be honest with you. Open carry folks, I mean, they respect my position. I believe in concealed carry. I can say I carry every day, all the time. And I believe in responsible gun ownership. But the open carry I thought was unnecessary. My own personal opinion, a lot of DAs felt that, law enforcement did, because then it puts everybody on edge. Why do you need to show your weapon?
Yeah.
Why can't you just carry it privately, you know? And I get all that. It's been a non-issue. I was very proactive to talk with different law enforcement agencies and the community, and just to really just encourage people not to open carry, even though you can. There's really no need to. Because think about this, what I told a lot of people. If Tony's carrying, and I'm a bad guy, who do you think I'm taking out first? Tony. So why do you want to make yourself a target? I don't want anybody knowing I'm carrying. You'll find out if you need to find out. You know, so it's been a non-issue for us, thank God. So it's been a non-issue. Thank you for letting me talk with you folks. God bless you. Appreciate it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you, and always, it's been continued, your professionalism. We're here to get information. Best way to get information is have open dialogue. We don't need to be bashing in that thing, and we don't do that in the Lighthouse group. So, Nico, thank you for coming and taking time, and appreciate you. I appreciate you guys for coming today. You know, our next meeting is May 2nd. Again, we'll have Barbara Gervin and Mario here to talk, and then you'll have questions there, and we'll figure out which one of them is going to be the eventual winner.